You want to run a superhero game with a rich population of background characters, heroes and villains and institutions and sources of powers and aliens and ghosts and magic. But a definitive cast of thousands is tricky. If you use either Marvel or DC, there's too many alternative universes and timelines and infinite Earths and crossovers. So you look at a game like Masks and you realize that too has generations of previous heroes with followable footsteps. But while in-universe they're household names, none of your players have heard of them. Should you stick to games about the first generation of superheroes? No, I think it's possible to have a rich history that the players will love. You need the right players for this to work, and one other thing. Lexicon by Neil Krishnaswamy. Superhero universes have too much source material and too many conflicts and variations and versions of events to ever be sure that players who are familiar with them aren't going to think of something that you haven't realized is actually possible. Batman always has one extra gadget that I can't remember, and I don't want someone saying, hey, let's use stripy kryptonite, and then I have to spend time looking stuff up to explain why that won't work because it's Tuesday. And lore, not just in superhero settings, is changing all the time as new shows and films and games come out. My solution to daunting amounts of prep is, as you'll have seen from my previous videos, not just to work smarter rather than harder, but also to work less. You are only one of the creative minds around the table, and you're the one who's already invested. Let's get the gang together and get them excited to write a history book. From Wikipedia, Lexicon is a computer-assisted role-playing game invented by Neil Krishnaswamy and popularized by the indie role-playing game community. It is played online using wiki software. Players assume the role of scholars who write the history and background of a particular fictitious time, setting, or incident. As the game goes on, players collaboratively create an elaborately interwoven account. You can use a wiki in an unlisted folder on a website. I've done this. If one of you has those, it's a great way of doing it. Or you could use a published Obsidian vault, or maybe somewhere like Wikia or World Anvil. The important thing is that you need to be able to see who made the edits. You need to be able to make links between articles that exist and leave links hanging for articles that don't exist. And it really helps to have a list of links that currently have nothing at the other end. I've been in a few games of Lexicon, and there's a couple of things that can make them really buzz along. Number one, we're all playing it, including the person who will later GM the campaign. Number two, as players, we do have characters. They're authors. They're not the characters we'll play in the eventual game, but they're scholars from the future. They don't have any stats other than perhaps some letters after their names, but what they need to have, it helps, is a little bio, like you see on the inside flap at the back of a book. Meredith Meadows is the author of Did Amazing Man Really Exist? And Amazing Man and Miss Fabulous, A Marriage of Lies. She lives on the East Coast in Minneapolis with her extended family and many, many dogs. Barry Fractal is the current chair of superhero studies at New York Combined University and has written several best-selling books, including Enhanced Isn't Always Super. This helps the players detach the author's voices from their own and makes it okay later on, if the authors disagree on something, for it not to feel like they as players are being shot down. There's no dice rolling to resolve the conflicts here. Perhaps there's letters to the editor. And you might have noticed there's a couple of things I put in those example bios that hint at the fun of the setting. Because we're writing a text from decades, maybe hundreds of years later, something has happened. No one needs to specify what it was, but there was an incident. Just like how everyone just says 9/11 or Y2K without going into the details. It's taken as given. Agree with your players that the nature of the incident is going to come up in the actual game, and you want to leave it blankish for now. Next thing to consider, do you want the players to end up playing people mentioned in the wiki? Or do you want to say this runs up to just before the campaign starts, and that's why none of them are mentioned. A quick decision by you on timelines, such as we'll be setting the campaign in 2024, so don't write anything that happens after 2030, or keep it to the 1980s or earlier, is probably all you need to do here. So give your players some ground rules for the setting, themes, geographical bounds, timeline, and of course all the usual session 0 brief on what we're not writing about. And then let them make their author bios, the first pages in the wiki. Ideally, get them to change their username to be that of the authors, so that shows up on the edits, and we're ready to start. From Wikipedia. The game is a series of 26 turns, keyed to the letters of the alphabet from A to Z. On the first turn, each player must write an encyclopedia-style entry beginning with the letter A, citing and linking to 2 entries that are as yet unwritten. These are called undefined entries. Undefined entries must begin with the letter later in the alphabet. Following 25 turns proceed consecutively through the letters of the alphabet, 1 letter per turn. In a turn, each player writes 1 entry that begins with the turn's specified letter. If 1 or more undefined entries are available that begin with the letter, a player must choose and write an undefined entry before any new entries can be created under that letter. A new entry must create and link to 2 undefined entries, and must also link back to an entry written on a previous term. Near the end game, when sufficient undefined entries exist to occupy all players for the remainder of the game, no new undefined entries should be created. The optional rule of X treats X as a wild card, and entries for the X turn may begin with any letter. What to write and what to make into a link is very much up to your players. It's possible they'll start quite cautiously and write obviously important people at the beginning, and then feel that the outward bound links from that to the undisclosed pages should be whatever feels like big plot. And this is where you having your own author character can be a lot of fun. For example, you could write up Amazing Man, but rather than outlinking to sidekick Steve to come up in the round for S, you might think, well, if someone else will use that name, I'm going to make an outlink instead for Amazing Man's town of birth. Now that's significant. Significant enough to have an article about it, and we don't know how yet. What's going on with the town? We're going to have to play to find out. I do also recommend, if you can help it, number 1, no one writes the articles that they've created the outlinks to, so we can avoid chains if possible. Number 2, everyone signs their entries in character. And 3, if 2 people want to write something on the same entry, they can, but these are going to be snippets from different books that are being collated by the researcher who's put together this history text. Because the cardinal rule is this: authors can disagree, but they can't edit each other's works. For superhero games specifically, but in general, there are also the issue of secrets. So someone might ask about secret identities, as not everything that comes up in this is going to necessarily be in character knowledge for the people at the time we're writing about. Remember, we're in the far future when everything has come out. This shouldn't be a big problem. I mean, you can look at how the MCU doesn't really do secret identities, and as soon as a villain goes to prison for the first time anyway, their real name is all over the papers. If people really want to have some things which are talked about but not talked about, encourage them to have redacted sections in their entries where an unknown editor, but actually them, the person writing the article, has blanked out details, classified or unknown or lost. Who was Miss Fabulous? Why is he called the Green Goose when he's bright blue? What's the deal with stripy kryptonite? Gaps, inconsistencies, conflicting information. If you've seen my video about maps, you'll know that I love these things. You might want to have a list of topic types for players if they get stuck for inspiration, and remind them they can use anything the other authors have written about as springboards without having to have them as outlinks. Topics can include for superheroes, heroes and villains, mysterious serums, magical objects, locations, corporations, aliens, alliances and leagues, disasters, discoveries, celebrities, movies, newspaper campaigns, court cases. You can think of more. Put them in the comments and have a look and see what else other people have come up with. And depending on the schedule you're trying to get these entries on, someone may drop out. If it's been 10 days and they've not written anything for K, then contact them outside of the game. Lots of sympathies. Tell them they can come back later and let the turn flow around them. When you've got to the end, it can be useful to go back through and backlink everything that gets mentioned further on. So if there's an entry on the Institute of Studies, but it's mentioned more times than there's links, link up those mentions. Or if there's 5 entries that mention a specific location, maybe write a nominal entry for that place that's pretty much just those links back out again. And then there it is. Maybe someone will decide to draw art for some of the articles or design logos for organizations or corporations. Maybe as the campaign itself goes along, you will want to add entries based on the game. Additional sections in articles titled From the Diary of Amazing Man, Volume 7, then this becomes something that everyone can refer to or add to and is familiar already with the layout and the content. And any half-remembered, oh wait, wasn't there something about this, is far, far better than the usual blank looks we're used to. Does all of this go against my suggestion to not write any world building? Yes and no. I'm still saying it doesn't all have to be the GM's job. I'm pretty certain you could have Lexicon running alongside your sessions, even if they were weekly. Just have a no contradicting play rule. Do I still think players shouldn't feel obliged to write pages and pages of character history for their one player character? Absolutely. I happen to think that having any sort of handle on the setting can make character backstory, even if it's very short, more grounded. I think games should be fun. GM is one of the players, prep part of the game, so if you're not enjoying prep as a GM, change what you're doing. And Lexicon is a fun way to make preparing a campaign something all of your players can have a lot of fun with. But if you want to watch my suggestions on world building and watch the video I've made with the most dislikes, and it's the winner by a mile, that's this one.